We kind of came out with a concept that actually built the directionality into the hardware itself. So it was a MEMS directional microphone where inherently in the hardware, you point it in a specific direction. It picks up a user's voice and eliminates background noise.
Hey everybody, Dave Lindberg in Hong Kong with a new episode of THD Podcast. Today we have Soundskrit coming to us, largely in Montreal, but I think we've got somebody joining us from the States as well. But before we get into that, they're also going to be doing some media. I think it's going to be going live before this episode does, but Audio Express is going to be running some article on some of the new modules that they're announcing. And so we encourage people to subscribe to the Audio Express. We have a discount code, so check that out and subscribe to Audio Express to find out all about embedded audio technologies in the audio industry. And also the Alti Association. Encourage people to get involved with Alti, a great networking organization for audio. They'll be at CES. They'll be at High End Munich, and they have another audio show coming up in Phoenix in the new year. So we encourage people to check that out. But let's get into it here. We have Simon in Sendai, Japan. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning.
And we got Sahil Gupta in Montreal.
Hello.
And Nathan Caughel in, I don't know, what's it, Rhode Island or something?
Nashville, New Hampshire. I'm just impressed you got the last name right. So.
Yeah, I was warned that your father would hang up if we said it wrong. So anyways, everybody, thanks for joining us today. And yeah, we wanted to get a bit of an update. There's been I think we met the first time about 2.5 years ago. And there's been some progress in design wins and new releases of components. So maybe let's not waste people's time and get right into talking about what's new.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'll share my screen here. Today, we're going to be talking about a new line of microphone module products that we're pretty excited about, and we're going to be, I guess, publicly announcing these tomorrow, at least tomorrow Montreal time. So a couple years ago, we launched these new MEMS microphones that were directional. So the unique aspect of it being that, if you look at the market today, most or all MEMS microphones are omnidirectional. And so if you want to try and get direction and isolate a user's voice and remove background noise, you have to use multiple microphones or microphone arrays to do so. We kind of came out with a concept that actually built the directionality into the hardware itself. So it was a MEMS directional microphone where inherently in the hardware, you point it in a specific direction. It picks up a user's voice and eliminates background noise. And we started sampling and designing this microphone into a variety of different consumer products. And one thing that we found was there was a lot of questions from customers around how to actually integrate this into the end product. Mm-hmm. One kind of unique thing about directional microphones is that they have two sound ports. They have a sound port in the front and a sound port in the back. And so if you think about most products, you can't always have a sound port in the front and back of the device. Take something like my headset here. If I wanted to integrate a directional mic into the ear cup, I really only have one surface where I can put sound ports on. And so, typically what customers would have to do is they build little small acoustic channels that couple to the MEMS microphone and bring the sound ports onto a single surface. And in doing so, that begs a lot of questions for folks, right? Especially if you don't have all the acoustic expertise. What should the spacing be between the sound ports? How big should the channels be? Where should the microphone be placed within that channel? How do I seal to the microphone? And so, what we found was that we were spending a lot of time doing iterations with customers to try and nail this down and get it right. And, what we decided is, hey, why don't we come out with a module level product that kind of already incorporates all these design features into it so customers could have something that's a little bit more, drop in and plug and play. And so that's kind of what we did here with our new, we call it our SKM line of modules here. And so what we're going to be coming out with is two versions of this module. And I'll kind of walk through them, but one of these modules is a single directional microphone module, and the other is a module that incorporates both the directional microphone and an omnidirectional microphone. But again, the purpose here was to make things easier to use, a little bit more plug and play, and really, accelerate that initial product development time that customers would take to get something up and running.
Besides the port lengths and that is how detailed can people get? Like, is there issues about the reflectivity of the materials in the ABS or the filtering capability of the acoustic mesh on the outside of the port? Like, how detailed is it infinite like most acoustics where people can just keep going until they go insane, or is it pretty flexible in terms of once you get to a certain point?
I think the key parameters you want to think about is the spacing between the sound ports,
Mm-hmm.
the internal channel size, and where the microphone sits in that acoustic channel.
Mm-hmm.
And then sealing is always a big consideration, right? If you don't seal the microphone properly with any microphone, it's just not going to work well, right? So I have multiple pieces going around it. How do I get a good seal? And that's where some of the material considerations might come in, but it's less about reflectivity or something like that, and just how do I get a nice fit around it. And then sometimes people want meshes and things like that. So, we've also built in meshes into these modules as well to give some ingress protection while not harming the performance of the microphone itself.
Okay.
Maybe to just make it a little bit more concrete here, my next slide. So the first module I'm going to talk about, we call it the SKM 2600. This is a single mic module. You can kind of see in the CAD here, it's kind of a semi-transparent, so you could see a little bit inside. But we basically place a directional mic inside, and it has a sound port in the lid and a sound port in the PCB. And then we create this channel internally. It kind of looks like a U or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that brings the sound ports to the top surface. And so, now by doing this, you have all the sound ports on the top surface. Rule of thumb, if you have two sound ports in your end product, draw a straight line between those two sound ports, and that's the direction that the microphone will be picking up sound. So, if I go back to my ear cup example, if I had, one of these modules in this ear cup, kind of with the two sound ports pointing towards my mouth, I'd basically get a directional mic that's, pointing towards my mouth. And so, again, this is a single microphone solution. It's supposed to be drop-in. Everything that we build is going to be pre-tested to ensure that there's good sealing. The module also comes with some screw holes, so you can just basically screw this into the end product enclosure. On the top side, it has a little foam, just so you basically compress it to the end product plastic or whatever it is, and then you can make a nice seal. And then it comes with a flex cable that you could then just plug into your main board.
Okay. And are these also available as reference designs, or are you locked into, I suppose if the customer's big enough, they could get a reference design from you on these?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Saul.
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Sal said, the purpose was to accelerate adoption, or I guess the customer's design progress. And so, we're going to have these standard versions of the modules, but everything's customizable at some level. So if we have to change a mesh or as a reference design, if there's a feature that the customer wants to replicate but in their own integration, I think we'd encourage that.
Okay.
So when we were just mentioning about the directionality, could you just go back one slide quickly? So
Sure.
if the user's mouth is horizontal on the right-hand side, is that's what you're talking about, the direction?
Yes.
Okay. And then that distance between the two, is that got some correspondence to the frequency response or the range of roll-up?
The distance between the two sound ports?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be correlated to the sensitivity or SNR of the mic. So the larger the spacing between the two sound ports, the higher the pressure difference seen between them. And therefore, you get a stronger force on the mic. You're going to get more sensitivity, more SNR. But you can't make it infinitely large, because then you're going to lose your high frequencies. It's going to have too much spacing associated with it. So it's kind of finding a sweet spot where you can still get, really nice SNR, but still maintain really good directionality at the high frequencies as well.
Okay. And this design is aimed at use in the main body of a headphone.
That was just one example I was giving, but
Yeah.
think about like conferencing devices. So,
Okay.
we have like several conferencing devices that kind of have a box shape, and they might put one of these modules on each side of the walls. You could think about like sound bars, video bars. We have some webcams that are looking at this kind of stuff. Yeah.
And a badge.
Yes, we have a little voice
Wearable.
badge that we're getting designed into, where they want to differentiate between the user talking as well as somebody in front of the user. One of the applications would actually be like sales training for people, and getting some metrics on that, and giving them feedback.
Okay.
Yep. So we actually, there's a lot of info on this slide. I won't go into all the specifics unless you'd like, but we have two variants of this microphone. We call it, the dash DP for a dipole, dash HC for a hypercardioid. So, our MEMS microphone inherently is a dipole microphone, like you see on the left here. So it has a front lobe and a back lobe, and is very effective at canceling out sounds coming from the sides. But oftentimes some people want more of like a cardioid or hypercardioid type beam pattern. So, cardioids will pick up a little bit more sound coming from the sides, but reject more sound coming from the back. So let's say I have a camera-based device. I'll take a webcam as an example. You want to pick up what's in front of the webcam and ignore what's behind the webcam. Might want more of a cardioid type beam pattern. So we're actually able to do this in hardware. And what we basically do is, you have a front port of the module and a back port. And the dipole, we put the same mesh on each sound port. So we actually use a 42 rail mesh on each sound port. So it's very balanced. It maintains that dipole pattern. And if we actually use a stronger mesh in the back, like a 360 rail mesh in the back, that actually will attenuate the sound in the back a little bit relative to the front. So we can, by changing the mesh value, we can kind of shape that polar pattern. And so we pretty much brought it out into two variants. We found that the dipole and the hypercardioids were the most popular among customers. Both give great directional performance. It's just kind of personal preference at that point. In terms of footprint, size, the modules are drop-ins for each other. It's really just that mesh that is changing.
All right.
This is a little bit of a exploded view of kind of the components that I was just talking about before. You have the microphone that kind of has some kind of rubber or gasket that closes in around it to create those sound channels that we saw before. It sits on a little plate with some screw holes, and then we put a lid on it to close it all up, and then on the top you have that mesh stack in that foam, and then you kind of put that all together, and it collapses into kind of the final product there.
Okay.
In terms of integration, again, one of the big things for us is making it easy to integrate and get something up and running. So, what you do here is you can see the product shell, I guess, in kind of the black or darker color. So imagine that's your outer product enclosure, and then you created kind of two standoffs on it. And you can basically just screw the module into the standoffs. We have some recommendations in terms of the size of those standoffs that give you kind of the right compression. But, if it's around a 4.5 millimeter standoff, you can screw it in, and then, you should get it up and running pretty quickly.
Okay. And you have a manufacturing partner already for these modules?
Yes, we do. Yep.
Okay.
And, samples are available. So anyone who wants to try this out, we'd be happy to send out some samples so they could give it a try.
Okay.
So the next module, one that I'm particularly very excited for, that was kind of looking at just a single directional microphone. So, that might be nice for applications where you want to minimize the number of microphones. I get the directionality in hardware, so I don't need two omnidirectional microphones to process a signal to get directionality. That means I'm not only getting the directionality, but maybe I'm reducing the components in half, which means half the power, half the channels I have to process, zero latency, because there's no real software associated with it, right? It's all purely in hardware. Another very popular configuration we see with customers is actually pairing an omnidirectional microphone with a directional microphone. When we do this, it enables a lot of software beamforming features. So we can combine the omnidirectional mic and the dipole mic to create really any beam pattern. So you can switch between omni, dipole, cardioids. You can even do some more adaptive beamforming to get further noise reduction. And I'd say this is one of the things that we see getting kind of designed in most with folks. And so we wanted to, again, make a module that just integrates both the omni and the dipole. So customers don't need to figure out, how do I integrate it together? What's the exact spacing between the omni and the dipole for the beamformers? You kind of have it all built in here. So this module, we call it, our 1600 series. The X here is just because we have the 1600, which is an analog version, and the 1610, which is a PDM version. So same exact microphones. One is just analog, one is PDM, depending on what the customer needs. In this module, you can see the dipole microphone is on the bottom over here, and we kind of have those tubes that go up. So this is kind of similar like that last module you saw, but what's different is now we've also added an omnidirectional microphone, and it's tucked away sort of in the middle of that mic.
That's a bottom mounted or bottom ported omni. So
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a bottom ported omni. So if I look here at kind of this image on the right, you can see how the 3 sound ports look. The outer 2 sound ports correspond to the dipole. Mm-hmm. And then centered between those 2 sound ports is an omni, the sound port for the bottom port omni mic. So having that omni microphone centered relative to the 2 dipole sound ports is really what gives you kind of the best performance. And then we can get really, really nice beamformers all across the whole audio range. For completeness, you can kind of see the polar patterns when we do this. Because one question people always have is, well, I'm adding these tubes to the microphones. Doesn't that compromise, my directionality and my performance? Because long tubes are typically not good for microphones. But we've really kind of optimized it. That's what we've spent a lot of time figuring out how to optimize for. And so, you can see you get a really, really nice dipole pattern, across, this one's going up to 12 kilohertz, this graph. Honestly, it goes a little bit higher than this too. And then the omni is kind of unobstructed as well. So you kind of have an ideal dipole and an ideal omni. So from a software standpoint, you can do a lot with that.
Okay.
Just another kind of exploded view of this guy. Similar kind of concept. You have the microphones that go into some kind of gasket that creates those internal channels that we talked about. And then instead of using kind of like screw holes and this compression foam like we had on the first module, this one actually uses an adhesive. So it actually has an adhesive layer with a mesh sandwiched in between. The mesh gives you ingress protection, so this thing can give you, IP57 ingress protection. And then you have this, I call it a pull tab for lack of a better word, but it's kind of this protective cover that you can kind of just pull off. It exposes an adhesive, and then you can stick it on to the end of your product.
Yeah, release film.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Same thing here. It all just kind of collapses and gives you the end module. It's built on a flex again, so you can kind of orient it any way you want, and then just bring the flex to the final PCB. Kind of the unique part, I guess, about the SKM 1600 module, again, is that it enables all this software. So, right here, what we have is the standard or fundamental first order beam patterns that we created in software by combining that omni and that dipole mic. So, you have your hypercardioid, your supercardioid, your cardioid. You can see that the directivity is very consistent across frequencies. When you do things purely in hardware, oftentimes you can get dependencies on frequency that the polar pattern can change because of physical lengths and meshes and things like that. But because we're using software here with 2 ideal patterns, we can make a really nice, consistent beam pattern. Another thing is because we have two microphones that we add together to make the beamformer, the math actually says that you get a boost in SNR. So, we use a pretty high SNR Omni. I think it's about a 68.5 dB Omni. And when we add that to our dipole microphone, we can actually get up to 70 dB cardioids. So, you're talking really, really high quality, high SNR cardioid beamformers with this guy.
Mhm.
Another thing you can do is, at Soundskrit and I'm sure other folks as well, we have what we call nonlinear beamformers. So, nonlinear beamformers is more than just kind of taking a simple summation of the two signals. It does, some more sophisticated math. And that's what you see on the bottom right here. What it allows for is significantly more rejection than you get with a linear beamformer. And there's always a trade-off between noise rejection and distortion and tuning between the two. But, you can easily get over 30 dBs of noise rejection when you do this. We have a demo with these modules, and when I speak from the front versus the back, you can't hear me at all when I'm speaking from the back, right? So takes a little bit more computation, takes a little bit more CPU resources and things like that, but it also gives you a lot more noise rejection performance. So for things like conferencing, it could be very ideal.
Mhm.
So these two mic solutions definitely need some form of digital processing. There's no analog combination of signals that is of any value.
We do it digitally. I'm sure somebody could find a way to do it in analog, but at that point we already have the analog directional microphone with the mesh. I'm not sure you're going to see much of an improvement versus using a single directional mic with the mesh, because when you do the beamformers, the omnis and the dipoles need to be really well matched together in frequency response, both in amplitude and phase. And so we're going for performance. And so honestly, getting the digital signals and matching it in software, that's how you're going to get the best performance out of this.
So when you come up with the design and in production, is there a calibration process needed to, example, compensate for microphone sensitivity variations?
So our microphones are within plus minus 1 dB. And
Okay.
so, the microphones are closely spec'd enough that most algos with a plus minus 1 dB variation will be fine. And actually, I think this is one thing that the module helps solve for us, right? Because what would happen is we'll build software for the Omni and Dipole, and then people will integrate it into their own products in different ways. So their channels and integration is different. So the frequency responses for these microphones would be different. So then each specific product would need retuning and recalibration for their specific frequency response, which we're still a small company here at Soundskrit. It consumes a ton of resources for us. Versus having a standardized package. If you're using this module, more or less, the frequency response is going to be the same, so we can much more quickly port our software to different products. And even from the customer side, they're not worrying about how do I get like proper and consistent sealing part to part. The only thing that they have to deal with is that last step, which is really the seal between the microphone and the end enclosure, but it's all on one surface. It's not multiple surfaces and things like that, so it's a bit simpler.
Yeah. Okay. Looks good.
Yeah, this is just kind of more images of what I was talking before, right? So we have that release film, I guess as you called it, Dave, that you can take off and it exposes the adhesive. And then, sometimes folks might want to create like a little lip or something like that to help with alignment in the end product. And this is all stuff that we can help with as well with customers when they reach out to us, right? It's fairly straightforward. And honestly, this is my last slide here. So we have these two new modules, right? The single microphone and the two mic solution. We do have samples available for anybody who wants them. They're shipped like this. If you just want the bare sample, they come with like a small PCB adapter and some breakout wires that you could just hook it up into your own system. And then we also have a demo kit that we call the Scarab. Oh, I'm sorry. I think somebody didn't realize I was in the office and shut off the lights on me. We call this the Scarab demo kit, and it basically includes all the beamformers that I was showing you previously. So you can get the linear beamformers, the nonlinear beamformers, and you can really try out the combination of the module plus the software.
All your demo kits and modules or demo kits are based on insect names. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's okay. I worked for a company previously that named them all after Bond girls, so I don't know which is
Okay.
better.
The original tech was inspired by insects, and so whenever I've tried
Right.
to venture out into names that are not insects, the team in Montreal adamantly disagrees with me until we adopt an
Okay.
insect-based name. So
All right.
Okay, super. Just one question about the software side of it. So you mentioned a few different processor platforms. Is this something that the chip manufacturers put in as part of their SDK as an option for customers, or does each customer have to figure out how to implement it in their own code base?
yeah, the customers would basically like so if they're getting the software from us, we'd provide them a C library that they would embed into their chipset. We make our software to be portable with any standard chipset. If they go elsewhere to either their own or third party, they would just integrate the algorithm as a C library as they would with anything else. It doesn't come there's no chips currently that already have Soundskrit's algos in it, though we are working with a number of DSP chip companies now, trying to see if we can help ease that process. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you know any chip manufacturers that want to preload our algorithm, we're happy to have that conversation. So,
Excellent.
That's kind of what I had here in terms of slides, but I'm certainly happy to talk through any of the points here if you guys have any more questions.
It seemed pretty intuitive and obvious to me. Do you think customers will have much difficulty in production with consistency of how the module is loaded and things like that?
Um, so far, we haven't encountered any problems. Honestly, it's pretty straightforward, right? You cut out a couple holes into your product, and then you go ahead and place it.
yeah, and I was going to say the type of customer that we're supporting with the module, they're going to be on the smaller to medium size, just because if they're looking to accelerate the integration, then they likely don't have as many resources. And so it would save them on the design side, but also in production, if they were just using a loose mic and they design their own integration, they'd still have to go through all the same testing
Yeah,
steps and quality procedures. So I think the consistency of the module from us is going to save the customer time on their end.
sure. Okay, excellent.
All right. I mean, for an update, I think that's good. People can go back and watch the old episode to learn about the nitty-gritty of where this technology comes from. So we encourage people to check that out. But yeah, if there's no more questions, let's table this for today. And we encourage people to check out the links below if they want to get hold of Soundskrit or find out some more details. So, Nate, Sal, thanks for joining. And
Awesome. Thanks for having us. Yeah.
thanks
Thanks,
everybody for
Yeah,
watching.
thank
We'll
you.
see you on the next one.
Yep. Bye, guys.
Okay. Bye-bye.